That's a tough act to follow. Thank you again, Congressman Balin, and thank you all. Rural is rural is rural, and I think that's a great kickoff for what we're doing. It's both a statement and a question, right? Because we're making a claim that what happens here is really relevant to a lot of the places in the world. But we're going to have to say what that relevance is, and that's part of our goal today. How do we take some of the things that we know to be true, that there are models, that there are opportunities and so on, and make them more concrete? And Congresswoman Balin set us out on the right track. She brought up AI, and that actually is one of the opportunities that we really want to interrogate today. So I'm really pleased you can do the next slide, to introduce our keynote panel today. Kyla Kasharian is a passionate philanthropy professional serving as the Senior Program Associate for Knowledge and Impact at the Seigel Family Endowment. Her journey into philanthropy was sparked by her drive to create more effective and mutually beneficial grantor-grantee relationships and partnerships. You can see why we like that theme. Kyla now leads the strategic learning process that strengthens organizational effectiveness and grant-making impact. She also leads Seigel's Rural Exploration, convening a community of practice that investigates how rural communities are shaping their relationships with emerging technologies and the narratives surrounding them. Kyla. Matt Dunne is the founder and CEO of the Center on Rural Innovation, CORI, where he leads a national effort to expand opportunity and strengthen innovation economies in rural America. With experience spanning technology, public service, and community development, he's built CORI into a nationwide network, advancing entrepreneurship, workforce development, and tech-enabled economic growth. Before founding CORI, Matt led community affairs at Google, served in the Vermont legislature, and helped guide national service initiatives through AmeriCorps Vista. A lifelong Vermonter, he now raises his family on a small farm where he grew up. UVM's own Kate Mays is an assistant professor in public communication in the Department of Community Development and Applied Economics, where she is also affiliated with the Vermont Complex Systems Institute. A mixed method social scientist, after my own heart, she studies the dynamics of emerging technologies in our civic, social, and intrapersonal lives. Her research currently focuses on human-machine communication and perceptions of AI to better understand how public and expert opinion can inform pro-social and community-minded technology and policy development. Kate. Let's see if this works. Working?
There you go.
Okay. I'm not going to stand the whole time. I'm going to sit on the couch like a normal person. The focus of this panel broadly is really to have three perspectives on some of these opportunities that differ quite a bit. And we've had some good conversations going into this, and I'm really excited about it. I'm going to sort of move around through each one, but the point really was to keep the questions to just a few and to really allow the conversation among our participants to really drive where we're going. But I think we really need to start off, and I'll start off with Kate, because you're right here next to me. Is AI inescapable when considering rural prosperity today?
I don't know if you want to start with me, because I'm the more negative voice around AI.
That's why I want to start with you.
Okay. Warm the crowd up a little bit. Get them on our side.
Get a little spice going. Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
Well, I think the tech companies want us to think that AI is inescapable. There's been this AI inevitability narrative that they have worked very hard to construct and make it seem like if you are not on board, you're going to get left behind in a way that is damaging and harmful. And that may be the case if we keep on in this AI hype train as we're going. But I do think it's important to recognize that this is really a lot of top-down efforts to make us think that AI is inevitable in order to integrate these tools into our workflows. They want us dependent on them. I think ultimately they would love to, we're training their AI right now so that the AI gets smarter, and I think ultimately for them to see the return on investment in AI, it's been billions and trillions of dollars that they've spent, and they are not making that money on subscriptions right now. I don't know how they're going to make up that money. I think they're not telling us this, but I think it's mostly they're promising investors it'll be human replacement, right? That it'll replace human salaries, which are much more expensive. And so I think we should be careful about not rejecting, I don't think we should be rejecting AI wholesale. It is here, and it can be useful. It is a useful tool. It's doing amazing things. But we want to be careful about an overdependence and over-reliance, and instead thinking about how do we maintain human skill and human expertise and leverage the AI as a solution for specific problems that are problems we want to solve, rather than AI as a solution for problems that don't exist yet. It's sort of a solution looking for a problem in a lot of ways. So I'll stop there and let some other folks maybe have a more positive take on AI for rural prosperity.
It's good. Matt?
So first of all, I want two quick things. One is I've been accused of being a militant optimist, including in other people here, but no one comes close to our Congresswoman Becca Balint, and that was, given what she's doing, it was just really exciting to hear her say that. I also want to mention that a couple of people have asked, I have a little addition to my face as of yesterday. It turns out AI is easy, post-hole digging is hard. And I had a rough interaction with one yesterday, very early in the morning. So, with all that said, I think AI is here. I think the point of the genie getting out of the bottle. It is not a new concept. It's something that has been aspired to achieve for a long time by technologists and others. And we are seeing some negatives associated with it, absolutely no doubt. And we're seeing some extraordinary positives. And I think Becca Balint's comments that we are in a position now where we have the chance to shape it, but not if we just simply step back and say, oh, woe is us, we have no control. We can't engage with it. We can't be involved. And I would say specifically for rural America, in terms of infrastructure, these data center companies and AI companies need rural America more than rural America needs them. And we need to understand that we are in the center of that moment where we can actually help refine the terms and make sure also that if rural America is going to shoulder the burden of AI infrastructure, we need to make sure that we're also able to leverage the opportunities associated with it. So driving what the parameters are to make sure that the decisions that are being made are ones that are being made with community, with long-term investment, but also making sure that we are proactive in embracing the parts of AI that can be transformational. Because I actually believe that AI net can be one of the most extraordinary opportunities for rural America to close the gap between rural and urban economies. And I'm happy to talk in more detail about that, but I'll just put it out there. This is an extraordinary moment because of a number of factors that have come together, and we need to embrace that, own that, and be the drivers of what that looks like as rural people.
Kyla. Just keep tapping it, that's what
Just use that. Oh, no, yours. Okay, great. Sorry about that, folks. And a tough couple acts to follow. But interestingly, I think I sit in accordance with both of you, which I actually think is how most of us probably feel, is a little bit of optimism and a whole lot of negativity. But to answer the question, I think, while inescapable is maybe a bit of an intense way to phrase it, I do think, yes, and I want to be careful how I say that because I don't want to be booed like the various commencement speakers that we have seen lately. But also because I don't agree with what they're saying. I don't think that anybody should be jumping on the bandwagon writ large and without thought. I think this is actually a moment where we need to be really thoughtful and we need to be really intentional. But I think AI is inescapable because of the consequences of sitting out. For rural communities, we've seen this before with broadband and other tech innovations. The benefits flow to those who own the capital, not to the communities that are housing the infrastructure and are losing the jobs and feeling the real effects of all this technology. So the window that we have to make sure that the benefit begins to trickle down to rural America is really small. And the tangible positives need to be shaped now through policy frameworks and governance and infrastructure that is already waning. So I think it's less that the technology itself is inescapable, and yeah, it's very powerful, and agree with Matt that there's a lot that we can unlock there. But to me, it's more of an inescapable opportunity to forge a path forward and to imagine different futures that we wouldn't be able to otherwise.
I'm going to definitely come back to Imagine Futures. I want to follow up with off script 1 second to say, you know, there's recent data showing up that says one of the struggles for our Gen Z generation in finding work is not actually AI, but it is remote work. And part of what we're talking about here today is the remote, I think some of what underlying what some of you were implying is remote work opportunities. How does AI fit into that? How has that impacted the rural? Do you want to say a little bit more about that? Because you were hinting at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of infrastructure, there you go. If that works. Okay. So I think there's we're just in a really interesting moment, and there are a few strangely good things that came out of COVID for rural economies. So bad overall, pandemic bad, but the fact that people realized that they could work anywhere and not have to go to a city that they did not want to be in to have an aspirational career was a huge step. And it didn't mean everyone moved, and probably a good thing, but there was this understanding that, oh, it's not that you have to give up where you love to be able to have that aspirational journey. The second was the largest investment in broadband in the world ever. And this is before the BEAD funding has actually been released. The money that was put out over the last 4 years has closed the gap for broadband access. It didn't close the gap for affordability. We still have some work to do there. But in terms of even having the chance of having gigabit speed internet, it is transformational. And every time in history that there was a step function in technology, whether it was the introduction of the internet in a commercial way or GPS or cloud computing, rural fell further behind. And it's because there wasn't the underlying infrastructure. But much like rural electrification 100 years ago, we're at a moment where AI technology, which is absolutely dependent on making sure that you have a strong internet connection for it to be equitably distributed and the opportunity to be there, is now, rural places are now by and large and on a pathway to be on par with cities. The other big thing that AI does is it eliminates the three big knocks on rural startups in particular, but also rural companies in general. The first being, you don't have enough people, right? The notion that you need 500 front-end web developers tomorrow when you get your Series A in order to have a viable tech company. It wasn't true before. It's really not true now, because as smaller teams can actually bring these ideas to market, and domain knowledge is more important than technical knowledge. The second was you didn't have the access to the experienced folks who had done 3 SaaS companies and gone to market, when now you have that kind of information at your fingertips with AI tools that are out there. And the third is that you don't have enough venture capital around, because venture capitalists like staying, only investing in companies that are within 20 minutes of their office. That's a known study. But now the idea of seed scaling companies is real. You don't need the amount of capital that you used to actually bring a viable company forward. And so there's this exciting moment for both venture-backed startups to be able to emerge from rural places, but also for any company that's able to get rid of the non-differentiated value, like chasing down people for their receivables or being able to do supply chain management. They can use what they know, their differentiation, and bring that forward to create profitable companies in a way that rural places have not been able to compete in a long, long time.
Excellent. Kyla, we're in the early phase of this industry, and you were talking about looking to the future, and so I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball and say what you think is going to change in this. And taking it back to rural communities, are there ways that rural communities can anticipate those changes and connect with that ahead of time? I mean, how do we in the rural get ahead of this instead of playing catch up all the time?
Yeah, and to the crystal ball bit about what's going to change with the industry, I think I'll leave that to Kate and Matt because I feel like they have more to say there. But as far as what rural communities can do right now, I mean, I think Matt put it really well that the tech companies need rural more than rural needs them. And I think there's an immense amount of power that comes with that. And as this physical build-out continues to occur, as fiber is being laid and data centers are being built, there's an opportunity that doesn't come around really often, which is that communities have the power to say no and to advocate for themselves. And I hope what changes that rural communities are increasingly able to recognize that power and to coalesce around it. I mean, I think one of the most important things that we've learned at Seigel over the past several years of working with rural communities is that the infrastructure to make community-powered AI possible already exists. That there's tight social networks, there's community governance models, that's especially true in Native and Black rural communities. There's a long tradition of the infrastructures socially that need to exist to make AI beneficial to community. So as we see all of these things coming down the pike, I think it becomes very overwhelming oftentimes. Everything that you see in the news, it can feel like it's a moment that's already passed, or it can feel like something that is impossible to take on. I mean, there's the world's first trillionaire now. There's huge amounts of money passing along this, and I'm sure you've all seen that graphic of the same $1 billion being passed between 5 companies. And that's resourcing that rural doesn't have, just categorically. However, there's a lot of non-monetary resources that rural has, and that is more true than ever right now in the leverage that people hold to advocate and to make changes. I mean, if you look to Henrico County in Virginia has like a really interesting example of them using a data center deal to create a first-time homebuyers trust. That's never been done before. And as this sort of progresses, we'll see more and more examples of that. And another great thing about rural communities is that they're more willing to work together and to learn from one another and to, you know, copy off of each other's playbooks. And I'm hoping that we'll use this moment to do more of that and to take notes from what other people are doing to succeed and bring successes to their communities and take advantage of this moment.
Kate, crystal ball?
Yeah. Well, kind of, I think adding to what Matt was saying about the possibilities for AI in terms of rural businesses, right? I think that rural communities looking in the future are really, or rural businesses are really well positioned to be case studies for optimal use of these AI tools. Right now, companies, again, I'll say this, AI is a solution looking for a problem, and a lot of companies are just kind of, again, top down saying, use AI, right? Managers and CEOs are like, just engineers use the AI and it'll work. We'll be more productive. And they're not actually examining whether they're being more productive. They're just measuring how many tokens, and tokens are sort of fractions of words and images, you know, data, and it's how companies calculate the cost of using their models, or how they charge us to calculate, which, by the way, they could change at any time. It's unclear sort of how they're calculating token usage, and if they could change how they define tokens, whatever. Anyways, that's a different story. But the point is that large companies right now are just saying, use all the tokens, and then that's an indicator that you're using AI, and we've been told from these tech companies that using AI will make us more productive, and therefore, you're more productive if you use AI more, right? And so what these companies are like seeing after a year of this, like Zillow and Uber are interesting cases, they're blowing huge amounts of money on AI token usage, and you know, from what I can tell, aren't really seeing the returns on that, right? They're not going gangbusters in their revenue in a commensurate way. Rural businesses don't have that benefit of just being able to like unfettered token usage, uncritically using it, right? They're going to be probably critically looking at like, how are we using AI? How much is it costing us? And what is that return on that investment in AI in a way that I think would be a model for companies moving forward to be looking at for kind of best practices in that. The second thing, sorry if I can just add, a second thing for like rural places more broadly in the future, I think these large models right now are benefiting from just large scale of data and a lot of compute, and at some point they're going to hit a wall with that that's already ingested all of the internet. And we're seeing sort of maybe some challenges with its ability, the AI model's ability to really be effective in very specialized contexts, right? And so these companies are going to need more specialized data, localized data, and so on, which will come from rural communities and other places. And so this is a real opportunity, I think, for rural communities to proactively be thinking about what is the data that we own or the data that we can generate, and proactively kind of own that or govern that data in a way that then they could, I don't know, monetize it later or at least protect it from being sort of swallowed up by these companies.
Yeah, just a quick thing on the crystal ball. First of all, I love your comment about rural companies. So Center on Rural Innovation is a nonprofit, but we also have an investment fund. We help communities to be able to embrace technology economies, to be able to benefit from those higher paying jobs and companies that can grow and support their communities. But we also have this investment fund where we put our money where our mouth is and invest in companies. And what we love about rural companies is they believe in crazy things like revenue. Like they actually believe they need to make money and they have to deliver value, and they're very frugal and focused on it, which I think is to your point. They actually are looking at AI tools as real tools to solve real problems in front of them, whether it's how to figure out that a electrical transformer is going to blow 6 months before it does, using computer vision and driving really fast by all the utility poles. So I mean, these are things that they're doing, solving real problems, which I think is the upside. The other crystal ball piece, because I do think it's going to be disruptive in terms of jobs and different jobs in different places. But what it can do is create a whole new generation of builders. And that's what I actually get excited about. And when I've talked to, I've got a 20-year-old who's a junior in college or just finished his junior year and is a computer science major. And there's a certain panic that's going around of, oh my God, this is going to change. But so many of his classmates and he are saying, maybe this is the moment where we can actually create that thing we've been dreaming about, rather than spending 15 years working for a large corporation before maybe they would pay attention to an idea that I have. And so my hopeful crystal ball, on the good side, and there are plenty of potential downsides, is that if we give people the license to be able to realize their vision and to start their own company or to join a 3-person team that is founding their own thing, this is a moment when they can do that. And if they bring a frugality so that when the prices of tokens go up, and they will, right, that's, I think, the only trajectory, that they will be able to use it really effectively to leverage it and to overcome those barriers, and we'll have just a blossoming of entrepreneurship has been on the steady decline for like 40 years in our country. And if this is a chance to replace that and have rural places at the forefront of forging those new companies and innovations and nonprofits that can solve big problems, that's really exciting.
I think particularly because the people who are going to be getting ahead with AI tools are the ones who also have a deep domain expertise and knowledge, right? Which rural places have a lot of that kind of specialized, localized, place-based knowledge that will be really beneficial when combined with these sorts of AI tools.
You don't assume someone else knows how to do that, except for post-hole digging. But otherwise, it's, yeah.
Okay, great. So we've cut across this a couple of times. I'll ask it directly. That there is, it's so often the case that rural, as we began with Kyla, that rural places are the places taken most advantage of by these new kinds of emerging technologies. And what are we going to do? How do we keep that from happening? What can rural communities do? And Kyla, you talked about this a little bit and started on this already. Matt, directly, what can rural communities do? We've heard a couple of examples. How do they set themselves up to make sure that they're not on the butt end of this once again?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two pieces to it. One is on communities that are being approached for data centers, right, which we've talked about and is an important conversation to be having. And there is absolutely standards and knowledge that is quickly forming and being disseminated to make sure that communities, if they choose, right, and it's their choice, it has to be their choice to have a data center, that they are in a position to actually grow and succeed and have a diversified economy. Our position is that they should be getting 1% of the CapEx that goes into a data center, not beyond the taxes, 1% of CapEx that goes to that community to support quality of life and economic diversification, that the community decides how to use it. That's the only, because they don't create a lot of jobs, they use a lot of resources. And then the other is to create real standards for water, electrical, and land usage that is, you know, top bar. And we have a chance to be able to set that out there and make sure that folks are addressing it. On the other side, it's about, I believe it's about leaning into understanding AI. It's about going and doing it. And so a lot of the work that we do is not, here is the 6, you know, curricula for using AI. It's go out and do it and build something. Go build an app. Like today, using tools like Lovable and other kinds of tools, you can go and actually stand up that app that you've been thinking about, even if you are not a computer scientist. At Google, they used to refer to, there were people who there were wizards and there were muggles. The wizards were the computer scientists and muggles were people like me. But it was a very, it was an important moment when my advisory committee that was trying to help us figure out how to work with AI in the work that we do, when I said, what should we do first, I was asking about programmatic things. What they said is, you have to go build an app, like me, which I was then able to do on a Sunday afternoon in about an hour and a half, built a tool that I've been wanting for years for our internal use in the organization, had been quoted $10,000 to build. We were able to start using it that next week. And so just making sure that in rural places, it's accessible. Go and just try it and set up as many inclusive community efforts, which could be at a co-work space, could be at a library, could be in school, to just make sure people understand it. Because once you understand it, I think you will have a better position to shape it, to make sure that we are in full engagement mode as the evolution of policy and democracy oversees it. We'll be able to leverage it for actually good things, and we'll have just better understanding rather than it being a thing to stay away from.
Okay, in the past, you know, it sounds great. Rural communities should be able to set the terms for those kinds of things. That's easier said than done. Oftentimes, rural communities can't set the terms for internal reasons, external reasons. What has to be different now to allow that kind of control? If we know where we want to get to in those conversations, what are the things that have to be overcome, and how do you overcome those in a real human community?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a positive trend with the data center question in terms of communities having real leverage in that, and this number is probably outdated at this point, but maybe in 2025, let's say, 90 potential data center developments were halted because of community pushback. So we're seeing, you know, over the last couple of years, much more awareness around data center developments and a lot more community-led resistance to those developments. I think if maybe small communities banded together, sort of across, like within the state, maybe across states, right, to create kind of a coalition against the, you know, to create sort of demands of the tech companies, that would put them in a tough spot because they really do need, like, the hyperscaling data centers that the big tech companies are planning or say that they need for, like, artificial general intelligence, right, which we're not at yet. But they really will need, like, these huge data campuses, right? Like, we're talking about a scale of, I think there's a planned one in Louisiana that is the size of Manhattan. So we're talking about a super, super huge I'm out of space. And so to Matt and Kyla's point, that the communities really do have a lot of leverage to extract from the tech companies rather than the tech companies only extracting from them.
Kyla, you've had a couple examples already. Others, what have you seen work?
There's a lot of things working, but I kind of want to flip this a little bit, just because I've already talked about it and I've heard a lot of great examples of what rural can do. But I think that there's we have to start pointing the finger away from rural. There's only so much folks can do to protect themselves. We also, as a funder, have to take responsibility on what are we doing to be less extractive. So I feel like I have to name the investment landscape right now and what is going on with funding. I mean, as you all know, funding has waned in rural communities for this reason or that reason. And, philanthropy wants to participate, wants to backfill. But I think the number is that philanthropy gives around $500 billion a year across everything. And that pales in comparison to the amount of federal investment that was happening and does continue to happen in some cases in rural communities. So the money that is flowing into rural communities, which is going to be even more because, as we know, we're entering a midterm cycle, which means philanthropy shows back up and comes back into rural communities. The irony of me sitting here, I know. But it means that we have a real opportunity to be thoughtful about how we're using those dollars. And there's a really interesting Substack that's sort of making its rounds. I think it's Jason Lewis talking about how there's all this excitement about there's new philanthropic capital with these new AI billionaires, and that it's going to revolutionize the sector and we're going to have all this new money. But really, when you look at it, the money flows into the same places. It's the programmatic deliverables, it's things that are legible to a Silicon Valley investor. It's not the grassroots, community groups, tribal communities, the folks that are actually maintaining community well-being on the ground. And that is where philanthropy can do better, because those are the groups that are shaping narratives right now. And I think another point I want to really hit on, and I can talk more about it in a bit, is the narrative piece. And the way that we're building cohesive narrative power is how nationwide change happens. And that only happens through resourcing those grassroots organizations. So I think there's a big onus on philanthropy right now to do this in a more equitable and meaningful way. I'll also say I think there's a whole lot of burden of proof that needs to shift up to government and to tech companies to prove that they can do well by rural folks, and to realize that when we're doing this work, both philanthropy and the private sector, we're all rural funders, whether or not that is something that you would call yourself. You're doing work in a rural community, so you have an obligation to make sure that these communities are benefiting from the work that you're doing. And a lot of that, I think, and it's not a conversation that many folks in the private sector want to have, is around ownership. Ownership of assets, ownership of infrastructure, ownership of capital. Those are all conversations that we need to be having, and that unfortunately oftentimes can't start at the rural level. It has to start from the companies. And there are really excellent folks that are working in these tech companies. That's not all big bad. There's a lot of great advocates, and I hope to see more of those folks coming to the forefront and working hand in hand with community.
So I just want to key off the funding issue, and the comment about being midterms is very funny, because it is true. Suddenly, rural matters, right? It's like, no, we're there the whole time. But right now, we just did 2 reports on this. On a per capita basis, rural America gets a fraction of the philanthropy of urban places, and on a per capita basis gets a fraction of the federal dollars, public dollars on a per capita basis. We just came out with 2 reports about that. And it's the same with venture capital as well. Like 1% of venture capital goes to rural zip codes, and that's a really, really small number given the opportunity that's here. But there are philanthropy models that are showing how to do this differently. And in Vermont, the Vermont Community Foundation, I don't know if they should be here someplace, but have just done extraordinary work of thinking about capital in all of its different forms, thinking about it in terms of philanthropy to organizations that have a certain expertise, but also pairing that with philanthropy that goes to the community, because it's really hard to, be able to learn a new skill or take on new muscle if you don't have the resources to be able to do it, and then following on with investment capital. And doing all three of those together are able to do, in its quiet way, this transformational work, community by community by community. And it's just, anyway, doing work now in 26 states across the country, seeing what, not that I'm a Vermont exceptionalist or anything, but seeing what we have actually modeled here is really exciting. And I think it's a great model for how philanthropy and impact investment can be looked at on a national basis to really do the transformational work that needs to happen at this moment.
Something can I add to the piece that Kyla was talking about in terms of ownership of assets? Something I was thinking about with regards to the specific AI tools, right, in specific industries like agriculture, like healthcare, right, where there's a lot of promise for these tools to be helping to reduce costs or optimize efficiencies or so on. There's the question of what data are these tools trained on, right? And typically they're trained on non-rural data, right? Because rural data is very specific. And small. And so for, healthcare business in rural places or agriculture in rural small-scale farms and so on, these tools may not work as effectively, right? And so what I would love to see, speaking of sort of coalitions of communities for data centers, but thinking, and again, like I mentioned this to my husband and he rolls his eyes and he's like, you're out of your mind, no one's gonna do this. But if we think about, like, if there is kind of, Vermont's a special place where people do kind of come together in unique ways, right? Thinking, like, I would love to see, like, different places band together and talk to each other about which tools they want to use and maybe negotiate with the tech companies who will need their data and do want their data. And my thing is, like, if these companies are taking the precious data from rural communities, which is hard for them to come by, it's expensive for them to come by, because they otherwise would have to be doing the farming on the ground and so on, then maybe the tools should be free for the farmers to use or for the healthcare companies to use. Or maybe the farmers get to keep their data and sell it in a certain way, or something that is different from what our current model is and has been for the last 20 years with tech companies, which is sort of a freemium model, but really what's valuable for them is the data. And so I think the more places that are adopting these tools are aware of the fact that the data is so valuable to these companies and coming up with strategies to maybe try to leverage that a little bit more.
Just jumping off the ownership piece, there's also an opportunity for AI tools to be created that are actually community owned and driven and university owned. And Marguerite Dibble, who I think is speaking at a different panel today, has actually talked quite articulately about how Vermont would be the place to actually create some kind of large language model comment or a way that we can actually take advantage of these tools, which, by the way, with AI is easy to copy, and actually be training it on our own data set and our community values. And then once you start doing that, then the other players are going to be like, oh, well, we want to participate in that, at which point you then have a much stronger position. So there are ways, and I think universities like UVM and others that have deep expertise in certain data sets in certain areas can start to experiment with what does it mean if we actually are driving the large language model opportunities and being able to have some of that ownership. It's so wide open right now. And again, I would just encourage us to be really innovative in that notion of community ownership, of leveraging the compute that is there now, which can allow us to move forward, but that the end goal is actually creating something that gives us even more agency than we might have had before. And if there was ever a state where that was going to happen, it would be Vermont.
Yeah, that's great. We're gonna go to some Q&A online, but first, one concrete piece of advice, one concrete thing we could do first. And you're talking to a crowd that's a mixture of rural businesses, university. This is, what would you tell this group to do one thing first, what we should do, start tomorrow? Kyla.
To cheat a little bit, I'm also going to give a step 0, which,
Okay.
speaking to you all as
What should we
individuals.
have done yesterday? Right.
Well, upcoming, vote. What is happening in our elections right now is going to shape what happens with AI and rural prosperity, so it's more important than ever to vote and to put people in place that are going to advocate on your behalf. But as far as like an actual first step, I think it's knowing what you bring to the table before someone else defines it for you. Do your asset mapping, know what social, digital, physical infrastructures you have, know what data you have, to both of your points. There's so much that rural has at its disposal for advocacy, for building, for innovation, and all that innovation is already happening. I feel like we talk about this like it's the future, it's happening right now. And people are already doing this building. So just do that mapping so when the time comes where you need to advocate, you're prepared.
That's a great one. Kate.
Critical and proactive engagement with things like AI tools and data centers, right? So that, like, rather than a wholesale knee-jerk rejection, which I understand, and I've collected some Vermont poll data, and Vermonters are very concerned about data centers, their energy usage, their water usage, and so on. But they do also see the benefits, right, for innovation and technology and so on. So taking that kind of nuanced approach and thinking, like communities thinking proactively about what would they want to get out of this, and engaging with that sort of proactively instead of, I mean, I fear that it'll just be a top-down decree of like, yeah, sorry, data centers are gonna have to come in here, and then they get a worse deal than they would otherwise.
So go build something. Use an AI tool. Think of the most annoying data problem in your life and go and try to build it. Because it is shockingly easy to be able to do, and it gives you just a sense of both the power and opportunity, but it'll also show you the limitations. And the interesting thing about AI is it's the only technology I know of that's its own help desk. So if you run into a problem, you just say, hey, that's not working, how do I fix this? And in a much too cheery voice, it tells you how to fix it and allows you to iterate on it. But really, don't, you know, you can use AI to figure out the best backpack for whatever, but really use it to build something that will save you time and get rid of something that just drives you crazy, because it can do that, and it will give you that sense of both what's possible and what isn't possible.
Great, thanks. Okay, so if you have questions for our panelists, you go to menti.com, and it's gone, the grid, but hopefully you've got it by then. First question, how might AI be leveraged to address and or counter Vermont's demographic challenges, e.g. rapid aging and out-migration? Is there a specific AI angle on fixing that? Kate?
Geez. Here's the thing, is that...
You're the social scientist. You're on the spot on this one.
I'm a demographer. No, I think that a lot of the problems that people say AI will fix in terms of like it'll fix our healthcare problem, our the lack of, we don't have enough people to care for the older folks, and so AI will solve it. And I think maybe, I don't know. I think more so a lot of the solutions that they say AI will solve are actually human solutions that need resources. And AI is, so I'm just going to talk about concern again, not a solution. But my concern, right, is that like AI solutions will be for under-resourced people, less privileged people, and then human solutions are going to be given for people with more resources and more privilege. So that's what concerns me when I hear about like, can AI solve the demographic issues? I think like, no, I think just like resources, like more teachers, more healthcare workers, and so on is actually the solution that like no one wants to actually reach because it costs more money than the AI. Or does it? Because AI is very expensive, really. But that wasn't an answer to the question though. Maybe Matt or Kyla has a better response.
I feel like you're very well suited for this.
Well, I don't know. I keep keeping up with the average age in Vermont, right, for a long time, and I'm now old. So look, the big problem in areas outside of Chittenden County in Vermont is that there is not the economy to import cash and export value. And for those of you who grew up in the 80s in Vermont, like I did, felt the first wave of manufacturing come crashing down. 1987, my senior year, was a particularly awful year in Windsor County when the two largest employers went under, and dairy farms went on the auction block all over the place, and the Mount Scunny ski area went bankrupt. And that continued over a period of time. What AI provides is a potential for entrepreneurs and small businesses to actually thrive again in rural places. And that does so many things. It actually creates wealth in those locations, like large multinational corporations hiring people may create some salaries, maybe for some remote workers. It is nothing compared to people actually building new companies locally in that area. And when you have those companies that are importing cash and exporting value, you're then able to support all of the community of life pieces that can make a community really thrive. I did a lot of work for a while in White River Junction, which was the 30-year overnight success of an economy, and a lot of that was about creating both the space for technology and innovation types of companies to be located there, investing in the arts, investing in downtown, which is finally getting a real flywheel going. But that only happens when you have those businesses that are starting that can import cash and export value. And I think, unfortunately, agriculture and manufacturing is going to continue to hire fewer and fewer people, and it's going to be more CapEx intensive, and so it's going to lead to more consolidation and ownership by private equity and others, unless we have a more, ESOPs and things like that, but it's kind of the trend. Whereas this moment where we can actually start new companies with new innovations that can actually activate that, then you can support the other pieces. Because at the end of the day, to reverse the trend, you need to have a vibrant place where young people want to come back, where they believe they can meet someone to date, where they can be a part of a community where they feel like they have agency and can be aspirational. The only path that I have seen to that is making sure there is more local ownership, small business development, and innovation-based companies, and we have the chance to do that if we're proactive.
Let's do the next question. Be one friendlier for Kyla. What does the ideal future with AI look like in 15 years? This is another crystal ball question. Want it or no?
Sure. It's a big one. Hopefully we haven't crossed the line of AGI. I don't think we need that, and I hope that we haven't done it. What I would ideally like to see is sort of exactly what we've been describing here, is something that's community-owned, community-driven, something that is improving folks' lives and well-being, is an asset to our existing professionals, not displacing them, something that is increasing the breadth of education that we can offer, not diminishing it. There's a lot of opportunities, but so much of this is going to be difficult to achieve because at the moment, what we're trying to achieve most is financial gain. We're not trying to increase human well-being. So I guess at the end of the day, my ideal future in 15 years is that we're focused primarily on human well-being.
It's a good one. I'll editorialize a little on this one. I think one of the things that we haven't talked about today that is on my mind a lot when I think 15 years is that rural places in a lot of places are sustained through good university partnerships. We talked about that today for UVM, but I was at Nebraska, I've been to Kansas, we've been to, if you go to West Virginia, and universities are in the sentence business. That's what we do. We ask people to write sentences to come here. We talk about sentences. We write papers that are made out of sentences. We give presentations that are sentences. You write sentences and you get out. And if you write them really well, you get tenure. And so we're in the sentence business, and we have machines that are credible sentence makers. And it's already disrupting admission, it's disrupting questions about publication and tenure, it's disrupting questions about research, and so on and so forth. So one of the things I think about when I think about where we are 15 years from now may not have a lot to do with the changes that went on within the rural communities, even vis-a-vis big data centers, but rather what's going to happen to some of the key institutions that have really, I mean, think about Grinnell University, right? Think about Iowa State, and what is Ames, Iowa without Iowa State? There's not anything else there. Windmills and a lot of big agribusiness. And so are there other institutions, university institutions, that are part of this equation that we haven't really talked about yet, that are going to be affected by AI, that aren't just, the immediate user issues?
I think, so thinking about AI in 15 years, and kind of to your question, but not quite, I think that like the problem, like I would like to see a greater awareness and value of quality over quantity. I think that AI has now like solved the quantity problem. I mean, it has been a trend, right, within academia where it's like you just publish, like, is it, you get tenure if you write sentences really well, or is it just if you write a lot of sentences really fast? And someone eventually publishes them. Yeah, right. And so I would, I hope that we kind of, AI maybe, and the AI slop that is here and is coming for us more and more, really kind of creates a dynamic where we actually value quality content more and more, and that becomes kind of premium, and maybe we slow down a little bit would be terrific. I don't know if that's realistic. Technology has been supposed to be saving us time and freeing up our time since the 50s, 40s, 30s, whatever, and it simply hasn't. But maybe AI will be the breaking point. We'll finally maybe really kind of shift the paradigm in terms of what we value and how we think about like a life well lived.
Good. Next one. Let's try one more. These are fun. We're done. Let's not try one more. Okay, so this has been a great thought-provoking way to get us thinking about what are the internal structures that are up against, what are the things that are contributing to rural prosperity broadly, and how are they going to be impacted in the future. I think the real fun of these crystal ball sessions is that you get to think about things that are connecting in ways that you wouldn't if we were all just sitting around by ourselves. So I really appreciate it. I want to say one more thank you to the panel for an excellent discussion.